Breaking news, this is your World War III update. The market is crashing, wars are flaring up, the price of everything is about to skyrocket, and gold is reaching all-time highs once again. But what else is new? Really, at this point, what else is new? $2 trillion have been wiped off the face of the earth in futures trading. Tomorrow very well could be a bloodbath. The only thing holding strong is gold that touched 3,200 on the continuous contract, and it is approaching 3,200 in the spot pricing as we speak, as the Asian markets open. Guys, this could be it. This is going to be the day, April 2nd, the multipolar world day. And remember that old saying, when trade and goods do not cross borders, militaries sure will. A 34% tariff on China. Are you kidding me? Everything is about to get a lot more expensive. Who do you think is going to play that 34% increase? Do you think that retailers and distributors and importers are going to be able to foot that bill? I don't think so, and it's going to become abundantly clear to people who are dependent largely on consumer goods manufactured in China, which is pretty much 90% of stuff nowadays, that, damn, this is going to sting in a way that it's already stinging. People are already living paycheck to paycheck. Now you tack a 34% tariff on that, that's a planned implosion. I've been telling you for the longest time, they're gonna crash this shit on Trump's watch. Have I been vindicated as of yet? Have I? Trolls, are you still out there? Remember a month and a half ago I told you the crash was starting, and here we go. Tomorrow could be the bloodiest of bloodbaths, because usually futures trading, how it works is it's not fully reflective of the market sentiment, but it's an indicator. And so it could be much, much worse. Now there could be a late day pullback. Trump might come out and say something to calm the markets. He might sneeze a certain way or look sideways into the camera, and people might take that as an indication that, well, maybe he's not going to be so hawkish, and maybe some of these things are actually going to be rolled back. But it's looking like this is going to officially demarcate our transition to a multi-polar world. And boy, oh boy, is it going to get hot. These are the biggest tariffs ever imposed in U.S. history, at least the biggest single-day tariffs. Now, we still have a way to go before we get to that pre-World War II level, that Great Depression level, but we're well on our way. This is all par for the course of initiating a new wave of industrialization that is going to be propped up by war mobilization. And you know what that means? The military draft. They're getting you ready for that. Mark my words, that is coming very soon. Now, I'm not going to go into depth about who the tariffs were imposed on. China, Taiwan, India, South Korea, Japan, some of the biggest economies in the world had some of the largest tariffs imposed on them, with the exception of Canada and Russia and Belarus, but they don't do any trade with Russia and Belarus, according to Scott Bessent, so it's kind of a non-issue. Now, with Canada, there was a non-binding resolution passed by the Senate that rebuked Trump's tariffs. I believe it was voted 52 to 48 or something to that effect. However, it's non-binding, so it really doesn't matter. Auto tariffs are still imposed with Canada, and everything else still sort of hangs in the balance. I think Trump is waiting for the election to transpire before he makes any final decisions with respect to that. Now, Carney is going to play it either way. As you guys know, I'm an advocate for Pierre Poilievre, the conservative candidate, on this channel. That's the first time I've ever endorsed a political candidate on the channel. I've always strived to be apolitical because I've never wanted to alienate my audience, but things have gotten so crazy with respect to gun confiscation and control here. They've lost their minds completely, and unfortunately, Pierre is the only guy who's saying that, hey, we're going to try to repeal some of these unjustified laws that have been passed. So vote for Pierre if you are Canadian. Vote like me, okay? I'm a single issue voter, but I think at this point in time, the Liberals have had their run, and now with their duplicitous stance on everything, they're saying one thing, they're doing another, they're pretending to walk things back, they're trying to appeal and paint Pierre out to be what they're not, what he's not, and typically with the Liberals, it's all projection. So in the accusation, you can find the admission, we'll say. Now, in terms of what's going on in Iran, let's just be 100% clear what's about to happen here. If and when they attack Iran, Iran is going to close the Strait of Hormuz. They're going to initiate rapid production of their nuclear weapons program. They're likely going to be bombarding facilities within the region with hypersonic missiles for several weeks until they run out. They're going to be bombing American bases in the Gulf states and surrounding regions. They're going to be bombing Gulf faculties and various critical infrastructures and oil and gas facilities, okay, which is going to cause a massive spike in oil prices, which is going to exacerbate the stock market collapse, and that's already been initiated in the United States of America. Now, the strategy, before we move on to the Middle East, in terms of what Trump is trying to do, many people are saying, well, he's trying to get this controlled implosion out of the way as quickly as possible so that the rebuilding process can begin. So come the end of his term, all of this will be a thing of the past. The question is, how quickly can we reindustrialize, especially when the tools, when the machinery, when all of the equipment that we're going to need to reindustrialize is made in China, okay? So that's going to add to those costs. So I have a sneaking suspicion that there's going to be a lot more specifics and nuance to these tariff deals as time unfolds, and perhaps the market is somewhat overreacting, but a 34% tariff, imagine everything at Walmart going up 34% from what it is right now. Scary times are ahead, my friends. Now, with respect to what's going on in the Middle East, it's essentially a situation where no matter what Iran does, there are no conditions in which Iran could comply with the United States to the extent that would be sufficient enough to prevent the United States from wanting to topple the Iranian regime. None whatsoever. They already had a deal. Trump backed out of the deal, killed their top general within the region, and now they're forever enemies with the Iranians who don't trust the Americans as far as they can throw them. And so right now what's happening is the United States is moving missile defense into the region, and of course you would only move some of your most sophisticated air defense systems, especially at a time when the Ukrainians need them, because I believe the kill ratio for drones in the most recent salvo was like 41 to 70. They only intercepted 41 out of 70 drones of the Russian drones that were fired, and these are Iranian Shahed drones that the Russians fired at the Ukrainians. These are the easiest things to shoot down. They could only shoot down 41 out of 70. Now, the U.S. has relocated 2 Patriot missile batteries and 1 terminal high-altitude area defense system. These are very expensive systems. They're the most sophisticated systems of them all. They've moved them from the Indo-Pacific Command to the Central Command region, CENTCOM. This strategic shift aims to bolster defenses amid escalating tensions in the Middle East. Now, why would you need to do this? It's not for the Houthis. The Houthis, have basically not been able to successfully get a hit with one of their ICBMs on any significant strategic targets in Israel since the war began. Even Israel's own systems, their aero defense system, is able to take these things out with the exoatmospheric interceptions. So the THAAD system is largely for the Iranian ICBM. So the fact that they're moving all these missile defense systems into place tells you that they're getting ready for the Iranian retaliation to the big attack that they're about to do, okay? So according to Israeli media and various Western media sources, the United States and Israel are in fact preparing for an unprecedented and joint attack on Iran with the aim of damaging its nuclear program. A large attack on Iran will begin soon, an unprecedented assault, the biggest since World War II, they claim. Now, they've been training to operate in these subterranean facilities as well, so I would not be surprised, and in fact, they're going to have some asymmetrical decapitation, assassin regimen component to this multi-pronged offensive on Iran if it's going to stand a hell of a chance of surviving. And it's looking as though this is going to be a replay of what we've seen with the Chariots of Fire exercises, where the Israelis would come in through either Syrian airspace, or now they can come in through Syrian airspace, as they've basically been able to neutralize a lot of the air defense within that region, and has basically alleviated most resistance that's in that region. And so they're going to come in from the west, and the Americans are going to come in from the south, presumably, from Diego Garcia with the stealth bombers. And this is all assuming that the Iranians are not going to be able to have the radars to detect them, because if they can detect them, they absolutely will be able to shoot down a US B-2 bomber. And could you imagine the headlines if a US B-2 bomber, the jewel of the American Air Force, was taken out? Could you imagine that? Somebody's phone going off? Hang on a sec, guys. Okay, looks like my administrator's cell phone, looks like she forgot her phone. Fortunately, she's old school and she doesn't really care too much for technology, so she'll be all right. Now, where was I? We were talking about the large-scale attack on Iran. Okay, so they're moving all the missile defense in there in anticipation that Iran is going to stage a major retaliation against this. Right now, U.S. intel is gathering intelligence in the air with their P-8 Poseidon plane in the Persian Gulf, surveilling presumably the Bushehr nuclear facility in Iran. Apparently, the Iranian airspace surrounding the Isfahan region, where one of their nuclear facilities is located, is pretty barren. They're claiming on some media channels, including Iranian news agencies, that airspace has been closed. That phone call completely got me out of the vibe. Sorry, guys. Basically, there's a limited airspace in around the nuclear facility that the Iranians are probably have shut down. Maybe they didn't even issue a NOTAMs because they don't want to give away too much. But of course, they don't want a situation like they had back in 2020, where when Soleimani was assassinated, they accidentally shot down a commercial airliner. That would be a major headache, fiasco that they don't need at this point in time. But we are just seeing massive military deployments across the Middle East. For example, Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, 32 C-17 Globemasters. These are things that are used to ship large amounts of cargo. So 32 of those, 2 C-5s. We have 2 Stratotankers there. We have Globemasters pretty much everywhere, transporting all kinds of equipment. Hercules, Pegasus, B-2 bombers, Stratotankers, Diego Garcia, everywhere is getting armed. We have aircraft carriers moving into position. So we have the USS Harry Truman, the USS Carl Vinson as well. And this is all an indication that this can't just be for the Houthis, right? If this is just for the Houthis, then pretty much everything they're saying about the Iranians is just bluster. Because in no way could they effectively neutralize the Iranians if it takes this much of their very limited power, which is spread out very thin across the 3 theaters. If this is what it takes just for the Houthis, which are arguably 1/100th as capable as the Iranians, then forget about it. This absolutely is a posturing which is geared towards the Iranians, and I don't think it has much to do with negotiations, and the Iranians don't trust the Americans one bit. Now, Chief Kurilla, General Kurilla, met with Israel's military chiefs for 10 hours to discuss Iran and the Houthis recently, and apparently the focal point of that conversation was, in fact, the Iranians. That was the bulk of the conversation. The Houthis were a bit of an afterthought. So that tells you where the focus is at this point in time. So reports do indicate that the U.S. and Israel are planning significant military strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities to eliminate perceived threats. However, it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to do that with conventional means. So I think we are going to see some Nasrallah-style decapitation strike attempt. There's a lot of potential insurgents and dissidents within the Iranian population that could potentially be activated. So I'm sure that the Ayatollah's security detail is working overtime at this point in time, but you can tell based on the faces by many Iranian officials that they know what time it is, they know what's coming, and now that the U.S. market is crashing, all they need is a little incident in the Middle East, just one missile to hit a warship, to take out a sailor, and they have their casus belli to declare full-blown war on Iran because, of course, they view the Houthis as a direct, emboldened, and empowered proxy of the Iranians. So that is that. Now, with respect to diplomatic possibilities, French President Emmanuel Macron convened a rare defense cabinet meeting to address concerns over Iran's nuclear program and the potential for U.S. and Israeli military action. And he concluded that unless there is an imminent nuclear deal that is struck, we are going to see a war with Iran. Now, the fact that this was an unprecedented, rare defense cabinet meeting tells you the gravity of the situation. The Trump administration apparently is considering Iran's proposal for indirect nuclear talks, but let's not forget, Iran was a signatory to the JCPOA. Trump backed out of it. Then Iran was no longer beholden to the stipulations within that JCPOA agreement, which meant that they could enrich uranium as much as they wanted. So that breakaway zone was moved from about a 1-year breakout period, meaning that it would take them 1 year to create a nuclear weapon, which is where the United States have always kind of wanted them to comfortably be. And Iran would, if they had a nuclear program, it would still take them about a year in order to build a nuclear bomb. Now, presumably, according to the Iranians themselves, they can do this within a day, which pretty much means that they likely already have all of the pieces getting ready to be put together, likely 500 meters out of the ground, well beyond the range of any bunker-busting munition known to man. And what that means is unless they have some really capable insurgency on the ground, the likelihood that Iran is not going to become a nuclear power is slim to none at this point in time, because unless we see a wholesale, shock and awe, full-blown, multi-pronged decapitation strike, I doubt it's going to happen. And you just need to truly go on Google Earth and look at how big Iran is. Okay, this is a vast, cavernous, mountainous country, which it's not going to be a pushover like Iraq, where in a lot of places the ground was very flat. There was a lot of places where you could access, and the main points of access where a lot of the population is consolidated is far from the sea. So, and if you were to drop a nuke, then you would become an even greater pariah in the eyes of the international community, which of course you've just imposed massive tariffs on, and probably they're not going to like you too much, so they're likely going to side with the Iranians. And this is one of the downsides of these tariffs. It's essentially a sanction in a way, because now that you've imposed tariffs on these other countries, they're now disincentivized, not even disincentivized to do business with you, because your populations aren't going to be able to afford their products. They're going to be more incentivized to do business with countries who are sanctioned. So this is how it goes. The United States just conceded the global reserve currency, and things are going to get wild. They're going to do a military draft. Mark my words, that is coming. The military draft is coming. First, they got to crash the economy. This is the planned implosion. I've been warning you about it for years now. In fact, since Trump got elected, I've specifically said they're going to crash it all on Trump's watch. A month and a half ago, I warned you that the markets were going to crash, and that's what's happening. Markets crash, impose tariffs, disincentivize global trade and diplomacy, and the next step is war. And they need more soldiers for all these wars that they're going to have to fight. So first they got to get, Pete Hegseth out there at the range running drills, looking cool, right? To get all those Call of Duty people off the couch. But by the looks of things, the future wars, at least ground wars, are going to be fought with robotics. Ukraine, for example, is building 15,000 ground-based robotic platforms that are going to have automatic turrets on them. And so not only a drone war, but we're entering the age of full-blown robot war, and the humanoid revolution is coming very soon as well. Today, we now got news that the nuclear batteries are actually going to be going into production in China. China, who we likely won't be doing, well, at least not in the United States, won't be doing a whole lot of business with in the distant future anyways. They're now going to be creating these nuclear batteries, and these batteries are small. They are highly efficient. They can produce energy for up to 50 years. And apparently the environmental effects are minimal after the 50-year period, of course. So how are you going to power the hunter-killing terminators of the future that are going to make human resources obsolete? nuclear batteries. We are here. Oh, you thought it was going to be a boring 4 years. Think again. China just began one of its biggest military and naval exercises ever, okay, on the same day when the United States is amassing force in the Middle East. Guys, this is World War III. Everything is connected. Why do you think the Chinese are making this move right now? They're making this move as a shot across the bow to the United States, saying that we see what you're trying to do. You're trying to cut off our oil supply. You're trying to sanction the Russian oil supply. And the United States has imposed more sanctions on Russia today and are planning on imposing sanctions on Russia's shadow oil fleet. What do you think that's going to do to China, who buys Russian oil, who relies on that? They're trying to take out China by first depriving it of its energy source. China knows this, which is why during one of the only months that they can cross the strait effectively and do either a landed invasion or initiate an embargo on Taiwan, they're doing it right now during April. This is to keep the United States spread thin. Now, the U.S. is still moving aircraft carriers out of the Indo-Pacific region, moving them towards the Middle East. So apparently they've decided that the best strategic maneuver at this point in time is to go for Iran. That's what they're going to do. And the price of oil is going to reflect that very, very soon. Okay, the PLA is launching Straight Thunder 2025 exercises in the southern areas of the Taiwan Strait. 19 warships and 50 fighter jets. That's just today. All right, that's going to continue to intensify as time goes on. Germany has initiated its first permanent troop deployment in the Baltic regions, right on Russia's border. Okay, 5,000 strong armored brigade, which is basically nothing in terms of how many people the Russians are mobilizing. And I think I forgot to mention the other day that the Russians decided to mobilize another 160,000 men. A very, very large mobilization. Now, they do their annual conscription, but I think this is separate from that. So the Russians are adding another 160,000 guys to their already battle-hardened military, and the Germans are going there with this 5,000 tripwire brigade, which of course will just be used to ensure that, you know, if the Russians do invade NATO, the rest of Western Europe has some sort of stake and in the fight and some greater justification for the invocation of Article 5. So that's what's going on in that respect. Now, that deployment is not going to be fully realized until 2027, but remember, that's not too far off. 2027 is a year and a half away. So they're going to initiate it now. They've built out all the infrastructure. Finland, I believe, no, it was Norway who got their 52 F-35s. Okay, so they got 52 F-35s they've built out. They've refurbished the Cold War era bunkers, so they're distributing these across the bunkers. If the NATO decided to do a decapitation strike on Russia, it would come from all directions. So all of these countries that have F-35s, they're going to all be fitted with the B-61 tactical nuclear weapons. They're going to target Russian radars. And of course, it's going to be a multi-pronged thing because the Ukrainians are going to be the ones who initiate it. If they do a decapitation strike against the Russians, first the Ukrainians are going to fire a massive salvo of missiles, drones, the new Neptune missiles that can travel 1,000 kilometers. That's how it's going to start. The Russians are going to think it's a run-of-the-mill Ukrainian attack, but they're going to be blindsided by a full-blown NATO decapitation. And the Russians have a vested interest in making sure that the Ukrainian regime does not collapse. If they achieve regime change in Iran, Russia is probably finished, okay? The Chinese are going to be on the back foot. Russia will be finished in the sense that their southern flank will be completely exposed. It's going to be destabilized, and it's going to be one more headache that they have to worry about, never mind the trade corridor aspect and the trade with Iran itself, which is a massive country, a massive developed country of 90 million people. So that's what's going down. Sweden, civil defense investments, they're investing $10 million to renovate nuclear bunkers. This is a laughable amount when you know how far $10 million gets you nowadays. Maybe in 1920, that would have been considered a big amount. Nowadays, that's just a paltry box that they're checking for the average person when their civil defense infrastructure for the elites probably amounts to billions of dollars spent. There's 64,000 shelters capable of housing 7 million people. I can say that that's a lot more than we have here. So they're basically refurbishing these, and by the looks of things, that $10 million is going to be primarily geared towards stockpiling medicine, jacemedical.com if you want to do that, and CBRN filters and filtration system, upgrading their filters. That's what they're going to spend that $10 million on. But understand, Europe is fully prepared for war. In fact, I have a little map, which is kind of interesting, which shows, it's from the Irish Sun, I believe, and they're showing how all of the various countries that are preparing for war right now. So on this infographic, I didn't want to stand in front of the TV today. There's too much going on. And so I'm doing this on the fly. But we have distributing survival guides, rearming, conscription plans, nuclear plans, bunker plans across the intermarium states all the way to Spain. Okay, so they're getting ready. In Spain, the bunker building has, I believe it's went up by like 200% since the war began with Russia. So just another statistic for you there. Now, in terms of what's going on between Russia and Ukraine, that situation continues to intensify, and it's wearing on Trump's patience, and he's becoming far more impetuous by the day, and I wouldn't doubt that he blows his top on the issue very, very soon. Senior U.S. officials are expressing skepticism about reaching a ceasefire in Ukraine. What a surprise. Who's been saying that since day one? You notice how all these right-wing grifters right now, and this is not an endorsement for the crazy blue-haired extremist left-wing nutjobs out there, but you notice how all these right-wing drifters out there, many of them trying to get a pardon or trying to get in the good book so they can monkey branch. You notice how quiet they all are right now about the market imploding? Where's Alex Jones right now talking about how the market is completely imploding and Trump and his cronies are getting ready to start another war in the Middle East? Where are they? You don't hear it. They should be telling you to prepare. Instead, they're saying, nothing to see here, just act normal, act like nothing's going on. They should be telling you to prepare. That's how you know they're out for themselves. Here, I try to do geostrategic analysis paired with OSINT, paired with keeping an open mind, trying to keep my predictions free of political, religious, and ideological bias, and that is how I've been consistently able to call this game as it unfolds. We've been talking about gold since the 1600s, not the 1600s, the year, but you could have been and you still would have been rich. We've been talking about wars breaking out, how the war in Russia and Ukraine was implacable. It was destined to result in a victor at some point in time, and that likely is going to come on the other end of a mushroom cloud, unfortunately. And this is not a matter of Trump derangement or Trump worship. This is just the objective facts. Please, I implore you for a second, just put aside your politics, your religion, your ideology. Try to see the forest for the trees. Understand that there's only one thing that matters in this world, and that is money and power. That is what drives everything, and it knows no political or religious boundaries. Money and power. In fact, it's a bunch of old guys trying to get laid, if you want to get Sigmund Freud about it. That's ultimately what it comes down to. It ultimately comes down to some weird, perverted Epstein Island stuff at the end of the day. We're not going to go there today. Let's get back down to earth here. As I was saying, U.S. officials are expressing skepticism about a possible peace deal being struck. It's not going to happen. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told the Baltic foreign ministers that peace in Ukraine was uncertain and that they were still far from reaching an agreement. In fact, the Russians have told the Ukrainians, who are currently in the annexed territories, who don't identify as Russians, that you have until September to get out. Okay, so the Russians are planning a major offensive, and this is being widely reported across multiple channels, and it's corroborated by OSINT that the Russians are planning a major offensive across the entire front, and this is why they're mobilizing 160,000 people. I mean, the Russians are fairly transparent about this stuff. So they're ordering them out by September 10th. Attacks on infrastructure continue. There is no infrastructural ceasefire. The Ukrainians, I always call the Ukrainians and the Iranians. It's because the Anians. They're both attacking critical infrastructure in both directions. In fact, in the last 24 hours, Ukraine has attacked Russian critical infrastructure twice and vice versa. Trump believes that Putin is stalling. The administration is eyeing aggressive sanctions enforcement, including against the Russian shadow fleet. Of course, the Europeans have been trying to interdict ships in the Baltic Sea, which eventually is going to lead to some sort of altercation. And the Russians have been surveilling the infrastructure inside of European countries, military bases. They've been surveilling with drones. So there's a lot of espionage happening all around the world, hybrid warfare. It's World War III. Please wake the fuck up. Ukraine's air defense is failing. As I was indicating earlier, 41 out of 74 Russian Iranian Shahed drones were shot down over Ukraine last night. That is a terrible ratio. I mean, you could throw a rock at these things, they move so slow. Obviously, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but Ukraine used to boast, whether accurate or just exaggerating, they used to boast a 99% interception rate. 41 out of 74, not even cruise missiles, let alone a Kinzhal missile or a Zircon hypersonic missile, or a, what is it called, a Orezhnik IRBM. I mean, forget about it. So the fact that the U.S. is moving Patriots, THAADs, which is the most sophisticated system in the arsenal, of which there are very few of these things in existence, the fact that they're moving those to the Middle East tells you where the priority lies at this point in time. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to continue to backstop Ukraine to a certain extent, because it's a game of whack-a-mole, and if they allow the floodgates to open in Europe or anywhere on the chessboard for that matter too soon, then it could lead to a precipitous domino effect in the wrong direction. Poland. The foreign minister, Radoslaw Sikorski, cautioned against deploying Polish troops to Ukraine, highlighting concerns that such actions could be misrepresented by Russian propaganda as territorial ambitions. So not because they're worried about fighting the Russians, and that's from Politico, by the way, but because they're worried about how it might be perceived by the Ukrainians, how the Russians would spin it as a territorial acquisition ambition in an attempt to surreptitiously annex the territory. Now, Poland, of course, is going to play a role, which is why they've been essentially armed to the tits by the United States. They're going to play the manpower role. They're the only ones with a sizable army right now that is not preoccupied in Syria like Turkey's army is. 500,000 troops is what their goal is in achieving. They'll be backstopped by French nuclear weapons, by British intelligence, and by whatever few soldiers and bottle rockets the other intermarium countries can contribute. A Russian bomber crashed in Siberia, a nuclear bomber. Nuclear-capable bomber, Tu-22M3 strategic bomber, crashed in Syria's Irkutsk region due to a technical malfunction. Now, whether or not this was sabotage, cyber, let's pretend it wasn't. Every one of these assets that goes down is one less conventional and even strategic option for the Russians, which increases the likelihood that they're going to have to resort to utilizing the nuclear option. We haven't even talked about North Korea lately, okay? So these four fronts of conflict, Taiwan, North Korea, Russia, Ukraine, the Middle East, are all happening simultaneously. The United States is stretched far too thin, and we're inexorably hurtling towards a major flare-up along every possible front. And I would pay close attention to the relationship between what the Chinese are doing in Taiwan and how that's connected. Talk too damn much. Excuse me. Almost made it. Oh. Woo! I'm only human, folks. Pay close attention to that relationship. Because everything that you're seeing right now is interconnected. You cannot look at these things in isolation. And the problem with a lot of hedge funds even, the reason why you're not seeing the price of oil move is because they're not reading all the signals. Now, you might get some hedge funds that are going to make decisions on the basis of geostrategic intelligence. But usually it's only once there's an overwhelming consensus, because of course you're managing other people's money, so you can't make any impetuous moves just on a whim on the basis of tenuous evidence. So mark my words, when they start piling in to the oil trade and when the price of oil starts to explode, it's going to happen very quickly, I think, because right now it's largely being suppressed by a group thinking complacency that's happening, and people are scared about the economy. That's where the primary focus is. Usually macroeconomics is unusually detached from a lot of these geopolitical fundamentals, which is crazy to me, but I understand. It's a game of playing with other people's money, and you gotta follow the science, so to speak. Well, we all know where that gets us, right? Anyways, my friends, I'm gonna go and try to get my voice back. Have a few cups of water. If you want to support this channel, we don't do sponsors on the channel. The best way to do that, CanadianPreparedness.com. Gear up while the getting is good, because the price of everything is about to explode. And unfortunately, for a lot of you guys who didn't get out of the markets when I told you to a month and a half ago, so is your 401k and your investment accounts. But hey, c'est la vie. Live and learn. There's always silver. Silver is still cheap based on many of the guests that we have had on and will have on in the future. They're saying that it's still cheap. Historically, you can't deny that. So maybe that's a safe haven to consider, or just go invest in Trump coin and fart coin and roll the dice. Why not? You know, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not the money and resources that matter. It's only you and your physical health, right? Well, let's not go that far. It does matter a little bit. So play it smart. Thanks for watching, my friends. Take care. Canadian Prepper out.